Hi, I'm Cher, and welcome to Cher, the Shadow Walker. Today, I'd like to share with you my experience with a Bigfoot. So, it was 8.5 years ago. I lived in Eastern Canada with my husband and my two extra large breed dogs. We lived in the boonies, as you would say. It was cottage country. We had no neighbors for 4 miles. We had 2.5 acres, crown land all around us with the highway in front of us, and across the road from us was lake upon lake upon lake, and lakes behind us. So it was peaceful, it was quiet. I grew vegetables. I've always had the ability to see ghosts, spirits. I am a psychic. I call myself just gifted. I don't like to use the word psychic. Everybody has a different terminology. That particular morning, it was 2:35 in the morning. The clock was there in the bedroom. When I came back from using the washroom, I remember looking at the clock, and then I heard a roar, a howl. It was thunderous roar is what I call it. Felt the house shake. And we're in a bungalow in the middle of nowhere. Our bedroom is adjacent to the driveway. And I'm thinking, we're going to die. We're going to die. Whatever it is going to come in, because at that point, I hadn't seen it. And I thought, that doesn't sound like any wildlife I know, because that's the first thing that goes through your mind. You're half asleep and you're thinking, huh. So my husband awoke immediately and looked at me, and I pointed to the hallway, and we left and went out. We had like a large hallway that led to the kitchen, living room, to another bedroom, to the bathroom, and it had a door there that you could go outside. So my two dogs came out with me and my husband into the hallway, and our big boy, Odin, he wanted to go outside. He was about 115 pounds, and he was a red fox pointer lab. So when something was around, a predator, Odin would stand straight, like very firm on all his feet, and he would kind of press down on his shoulders. He was pretty large in the shoulders, and there was a ridge of hair that would go all the way up on his back, right up to his forehead. I stood there, and that ridge was up. My Lancia, my female, she leaned against my leg, and she just kind of stood there and didn't say anything. So I looked at my husband, and he's like, okay, what do you think it was? And I said, I don't know. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't a bear. I'm used to all these sounds. I grew up with this stuff. Um, so I went over to the bedroom, crept in, and peeked out the window. I didn't see anything. He asked me, my husband, he said, did you see anything? And I shook my head no. I stood there for a minute, and it was kind of foggy out, like it usually was because of the lakes. And out of the fog, so the driveway was like double wide, and then there was another driveway beside it over to our cottage. We used the cottage for storage. So it appeared to me out of the mist over towards the cottage. And it just stood there. And it was a female. I could tell it was a female. And it didn't wave its hands or anything like that. She just stood there and she looked at me. And I wanted to say to my husband, I see a Bigfoot. But I just stood there, and she connected with me, and I calmed down. And I realized that she had been trying to calm me down. I don't know why she came out at that time and yelled. Maybe she sensed I was up. I don't know. That wasn't passed along to me. But telepathically, she did pass along to me that she came in peace, that the He was my guardian, that they were our guardians, meaning everyone here on earth, and that she was here because the world was in crisis. At that time, if you look back in history, I guess you'd call it, of 8.5 to 9 years ago, you're going to see the mess the world was in then. There's still a lot of mess in the world now. I I understood what she was saying to me, and she just kind of dissipated back into the fog. I'm used to seeing bears, so anybody that wants to debunk that, go for it. There's no bears. The black bears are not that large. She was brown, not black. And bears generally didn't come on my property because I had sauerkraut out and they didn't come around. And we were used to seeing bears. We were used to seeing everything, every type of wildlife. So, but the way that she faded back into that wasn't something that a normal animal would do. Like, literally evaporated. I because when the fog went over her, she was gone. Like, she was totally gone. When I went back out into the hall and told my husband, and he stood there and looked at me, he was still in flight mode. He was ready to go for the car. He figured he could go out the back door, which you'd go down to the living room, out onto a deck that faced Crown Land, because that's all that was there was bush behind us, and down the side ramp, which was 10 feet. It was fenced and railed, and around the vehicle, and the vehicle was sitting between the house and the cottage, and get in the door. And I said, well, I'm not going. I'm staying. And you're never going to make it down there at this hour in the dark. And I felt that it would be more of a threat if he went out there. And I didn't feel the threat off of her. So he sat down on the couch, and I proceeded to make us a coffee in the dark. I wasn't going back to sleep then. And we heard another howl, and you felt the house shake. Now, was the house shaking? I don't know. But I could feel it right into my bones. So you literally were shaken to your core. You felt your whole body shake. The dawn came around, I'm going to say 6:15 to 6:30 that morning. My husband had his shower, it had mine, and he headed out in daylight to the car. And he was a little bit apprehensive of leaving me there that day, but I said, no, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Now, I grew vegetables, and it was spring and it was early, and I had my one greenhouse and another one that I domed over, and that had peas in it. So I went outside to the greenhouse to pick and bring in some of the vegetables that I had in there. And the dogs came with me. It was about 9:30 to 9:40 that morning. And that area is all fenced in. I didn't hear anything when I went out, and I didn't see anything. So I worked around in the greenhouse, and then I could hear these knocks every now and then. And I thought, that's weird. So I came out of the greenhouse, and my dog was standing there, and he was looking at me, and the hair was all up on his back again. And I said, okay, Odie. So I looked around and I yelled, and I said, are you there? And nothing. I waited a little bit. So I thought, well, I'll communicate with it if I can. It didn't hurt me the first time. It didn't come through the house. And believe you me, something that big, I think it could probably move part of the house. Frankly, it was that big. But I stood there in the yard, and I listened for a little bit longer, and I heard a few more knocks, and I got a sense that she was communicating trying to communicate with me. So I went and stood up on the deck. And it was funny because I just left everything where it was in the greenhouse. And I went and I stood up on our deck. Our deck was about 12 feet wide by about 14 feet long. And it was 4.5 feet off the ground. So when I was standing up there, I was overlooking an area of the woods. And I didn't see any movement in the woods at all, which was unusual because normally we had this flying squirrel around, and I was always leaving her peanuts along the deck, and she would come up, and the dogs just loved her, and she would scurry along the deck, and there was never an issue. They didn't try to hurt her or anything. They just kind of basically played around. So I stood there and I listened, and I heard a couple more knocks, and then I got this feeling that she was trying to tell me something. So I relaxed myself and I just said, okay, if you've got a message for me, let me know. And she told me that she was my guardian. And she told me not to be afraid. And I stood there for a couple of seconds more. It seemed like 10 minutes, but it really wasn't. I went into the house with the dogs, and then I realized I left everything outside. I have to go back down. So I went back down to the greenhouse and got the stuff that I needed and came back up. The dogs followed me. We stood on the deck, and it was strange. It was so strange. Then you heard the birds start to tweet. You heard the squirrels. But before that, you heard nothing but total silence. And people always ask when you live out in the wilderness like that and you don't have people around, what kind of sounds do you hear? The odd time I'd hear a raccoon slide down a tree or a black bear slide down a tree. We could hear the koi. I had heard the screech of cats. We had barred owls come around, different types of birds. Grouse there, the bird that comes along and for example, a grouse bird will sound like when it's beating its chest or wings together in mating season in the fall, sounds like a ball bouncing. So if you're in the middle of nowhere and there happens to be a grouse in mating season, you will think somebody's bouncing a ball. So you have to be pretty in tune with the wildlife around you to understand what's there, the sounds that it makes, and to be able to debunk what is and isn't there was always something that we did. Now, I met another man through a friend of a friend. I should say I spoke to him in text. He had a Bigfoot encounter in Eastern Canada, and he actually sent me a photo that he got of a foot. Um, I didn't get any photos. I didn't even think of it when we had that encounter. I didn't go that way in the morning. Later on, when my husband got home and we looked around, we didn't see anything. The gravel was hard packed in the driveway. I see nothing, no footprints of any kind. I wondered how something so large could be so aloof, but honestly, they're not really from this world, so there is a great possibility that they can be as aloof as they want to be. I've gone out in many different areas of the wilderness in Canada. And out here where I am now in the West, one particular area that we went, um, we heard howl, and it sounded quite similar to what we had heard. We were out looking at wild horses that day, and after viewing the wild horses and taking pictures of them, we proceeded to drive down this long road that we had no cell signal, no anything, and that was probably a 2.5 hour drive out of that area. We stopped at one point and took the dogs out to the washroom, and that's when we heard that howl. And it was similar to the howl that we had heard in eastern Canada. So I know there must have been one around. Do I think it was the same one? No. Was I going out into the bush to hunt and look for one, like searching? No, I was not. Now, I realize that a lot of other people have had encounters, and my husband and I have discussed it. This is the first time I've come out publicly about it. There's a couple of people, my one girlfriend that I told about it, and John, the other guy that had a Bigfoot encounter, but I haven't spoke to people about it. Not because I haven't spoke about it because I just don't feel that people were ready for it. Or that people are going to think you're crazy because you've seen something that they haven't seen. And I get that a lot. Being a psychic, I call myself gifted. Um, the gifts that I was given to do what I can do psychically, I am grateful for. And I only found out 6 years ago where they had come from. My ancestral grandfather was a grand chief. I didn't know I was Métis. And I'm grateful every day for having that information now. It put every piece of the puzzle together for me. And the one thing that she did tell me was her name. So I pronounced it as best I can. It came out like Anjou. So I used that name when I wrote my book, and I wrote my book in a sci-fi style. The psychic parts of the book are the truth. Seeing the Bigfoot is the truth. But I put it to a story because I really felt that if I could get it in there in a way that people could understand everything, there's a lot of people out there that have seen Bigfoots that are going to go, uh-huh, yep. Because I do believe that other people, I'm not the only person I know that's seen one, and I know I'm not the only person that they've psychically spoken to. And I'd like to hear about your experiences with a Bigfoot. Have you been out for a walk and you felt like something was watching you? Did you actually see one? Did you find footprint? Did you hear wood knocks? There are so many different aspects of this that need to be looked at. And I like to look at things in a different way. So I'd like to debunk some things and I'd like to hear about your experiences. You don't have to show your face. You can be anonymous because a lot of people don't want other people to know that they've seen a Bigfoot. Personally, I believe those of you that have actually witnessed a sighting of a Bigfoot, that's a gift. That's a true gift of the insight of where we actually came from. We are not of this world. We are of another planet. We were put here to get along. That was the one thing that she made clear to me, and that our world was in peril, and I could feel the sadness off of her from it. So I kind of felt ashamed when she'd said that to me because I thought, why can't people get along? I don't understand why there is so much war in the world. I really don't. And I'm not saying that if we were all getting along on this planet that we would never see a Bigfoot. I can't make that statement, but I can tell you for sure the way that the world is right now, there are a lot more sightings. And if you've had a sighting recently or before, sit back and relax and remember you're not alone. And if you'd like to talk about it with me, I'd love to hear about it. And food for thought, if you look back in history, people have been seeing Bigfoots, dogmen, ghosts, demons forever. It's historically written. You're not crazy, and you're not alone, and we are not alone. So if you would like to join me for a live, I'm going to have one in a few days, and I would love to hear of your Bigfoot experiences. If you would like to come up and talk on the panel, that would be great. You could email me. So my name is Sher, and I am the Shadow Walker, and I look forward to having a conversation about you. And let's look at the myths, and let's debunk some of the things, and let's just tell our truths. And I'd like to thank you so much for stopping by.